You ever heard of a road that doesn't lead anywhere, but people never come back once they take it? Tonight's story isn't just a legend, it's a chilling, true account of what happened to one man who dared to take the Black Hollow Road. This story will take you through an abandoned stretch of road, a cursed town, and a sinister mystery that goes far beyond anything you can imagine. But beware, by the time this story is over, you'll think twice before taking a shortcut. Let's begin with the tale of the Black Hollow Road. Jonathan Callahan wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. A 34-year-old truck driver, he had spent years navigating lonely highways, sleeping in his rig, and hearing wild tales from other drivers. None of it fazed him. That was until one stormy night when his GPS malfunctioned, and he made the fateful decision to turn onto an unmarked road. Jonathan was hauling cargo across state lines, desperate to make his delivery on time. The rain was relentless, hammering against his windshield and drowning out the hum of his truck's engine. "Damn GPS," he muttered, smacking the device as it recalculated for the third time in an hour. Then he saw it, a narrow road branching off to the right. The sign was old and barely legible, but he could make out the words, "Black Hollow Road." Shortcut, he thought. Perfect. But as he turned onto the road, something felt off. The air seemed heavier, the rain quieter, and the shadows cast by his headlights danced unnaturally. He shook off the feeling. It was just another lonely road, or so he thought. The further Jonathan drove, the stranger things became. The rain seemed to vanish as if the road existed in its own bubble of silence. The trees on either side were impossibly tall, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. And then, the radio crackled. Jonathan hadn't touched the dial, it had been silent for hours, but now, faint whispers filled the cabin. "Turn back. He's watching." "What the hell?" Jonathan said aloud, turning the radio off. But the whispers didn't stop. His headlights flickered, and for a split second, he thought he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, a man, drenched and motionless, staring directly at him. Jonathan slammed on the brakes, but when he looked again, the road was empty. "Get it together, man," he muttered, shaking his head. But deep down, he felt it, he wasn't alone. After what felt like hours, Jonathan saw lights ahead. A small town emerged through the fog, its streets eerily deserted. The buildings were old, with boarded-up windows and faded signs that hinted at a once-thriving community. He pulled into what looked like a gas station, but the pumps were rusted and covered in vines. "Hello? Anyone here?" he called out, stepping into the rain-soaked street. The silence was oppressive. Even the sound of his boots on the pavement seemed muted. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement, a figure standing in the window of a nearby diner. It was a woman, her pale face pressed against the glass. Jonathan approached cautiously. "Hey, ma'am, I think I'm lost. Can you?" Before he could finish, the woman vanished, leaving the curtain swaying as if she'd never been there. Jonathan's frustration turned to unease. Something was very wrong with this place. Jonathan was about to get back into his truck when he heard footsteps behind him. Spinning around, he came face to face with an old man dressed in a tattered coat, his eyes wild with fear. "You shouldn't be here," the man hissed. "Look, I'm just passing through," Jonathan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "No one passes through Black Hollow," the old man whispered. "Once you're here, you're marked." "Marked? Marked for what?" The man's gaze darted to the shadows. "For him. The collector. He takes what he's owed." Before Jonathan could ask more, the old man bolted into the darkness, leaving him alone in the deserted town. Jonathan laughed nervously. "Marked? The collector? What kind of nonsense is this?" But as he climbed back into his truck, he noticed something on his arm, a black mark, like a burn, etched into his skin. It hadn't been there before. Jonathan's unease turned to full-blown panic as he tried to drive out of the town. But no matter which direction he turned, the road looped back into Black Hollow. The whispers in his cab grew louder, overlapping and frantic. He covered his ears, but it didn't help. And then he saw it, a figure in the distance, standing in the middle of the road. This time, there was no mistaking it. The collector. It was a tall, gaunt figure shrouded in darkness, its face obscured by a hood. In its hand, it held a scythe that gleamed even in the faintest light. Jonathan slammed the accelerator, determined to run it down. But as his truck approached, the figure disappeared, reappearing a moment later in his rearview mirror. "No!" Jonathan screamed, swerving wildly. The collector raised its hand, and suddenly the truck's engine died. The vehicle skidded to a halt, plunging Jonathan into darkness. Jonathan grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, his breaths coming in short, panicked bursts. "What do you want?" he shouted into the void. The collector emerged from the shadows, its voice a deep, guttural growl. "You owe a debt. I don't owe you anything. All who enter Black Hollow owe me. Payment is due." Jonathan's anger flared. "You're not taking me." He ran back to his truck, determined to fight. But when he turned on the flashlight, the beam illuminated a horrifying sight, dozens of faces, pale and lifeless, staring at him from the surrounding trees. The collector raised its scythe, and the faces began to whisper in unison. "Join us, join us." Jonathan's scream echoed through the empty night as the scythe came down. Days later, a search party found Jonathan's truck abandoned on Black Hollow Road. The doors were locked, and the keys were still in the ignition. But Jonathan was never found. Rumors spread among the locals, but no one dared to investigate. The legend of Black Hollow grew, warning travelers to stay far away from the cursed road. But every now and then, a lost soul ignores the warnings, drawn by the faint lights of the town. And the collector waits, ready to claim what he's owed. Don't miss the next terrifying tale. Subscribe now and make sure you're ready for the next nightmare.